Old School Lane Casual Chats is brought to you by oldschoollane.blogspot.com and is associated with Channel Frederator, Manic Expression, the Comic Book Cast, and the Arun Mehta Show. Hello everyone, welcome to a new episode of Casual Chats. I am Patricia, and I am back with someone who hasn't been on for a while. We have Calamia, aka Comic Uno, so welcome back.
How's it going? Thanks for having me.
So today we are going to be discussing about something comic book related again, except that it's not based off of anything from Marvel or DC or Dark Horse or anything of the sort. It's actually an independent comic, and I just so happen to be interviewing the author of the comic book. So we're going to be talking about Like Father, Like Daughter, and discuss more in detail about how you came up with the idea and about the story plot, the characters, and various other things. So why don't you give a brief description for those who don't know what it's about?
Yeah, of course. Well, currently I have a Kickstarter. Well, as we record this, it's the eve of the Kickstarter, and I'm launching a 30-day campaign for Like Father, Like Daughter. We're up to issue 7. It's about a high school girl. Father lets her become a full-time superhero. Everyone in the world loves him except for her, and then she inherits his abilities. There's a lot of twists and turns that come, and yeah, really excited for people to read it.
How'd you come up with the idea?
Oh, wow. So I actually wrote this years ago, a couple of years ago when I was in college. I just graduated with my master's, so it's been a while. And I wrote a screenplay for this story, and it's obviously evolved and changed since it's become a comic. But it actually started out as a screenplay, and I remember it was on my computer, and I was like, I really want to do something with this. I've been reviewing comics, at least at that time, for 5 years. Now it's been 10 years. I've been reviewing comics since I was in high school, and I've read comics since I don't know when. It's been so long. And I've always wanted to do that. I wanted to do something in comics. So I decided to write a comic, and here we are 7 issues later. I have another comic as well, and even more planned. So it's kind of surreal.
Yeah, absolutely. Considering that the independent comic scene has definitely grown over the past couple of years, with a lot more people wanting to say, hey, I have this idea that I want to write down, and then I'm going to pitch it over to, these major companies, but then they don't pick it up. And it's like, oh, what am I going to do? But no, I think nowadays, because with the advent of the internet and many companies that are out there that are willing to take in some creative new ideas, I think that the fact that you're able to do this is very, it's very telling about how you're able to take something that you wanted to pitch as something else and turn it into its own thing. So that's great of you.
Yeah, for sure. It's really cool to see how the indie scene has grown, and even people who work for Marvel and DC deciding with their own indie books, kind of taking a similar avenue, especially with Kickstarter. That's really happened, especially this year with things like Keanu Reeves' Kickstarter, Scott Snyder's Kickstarter, and I feel like every month there's some big time comic creator jumping on board Kickstarter and saying, "Hey, I kind of want to do this on my own," because I think there's something to say with that, and the control of that is a really interesting thing.
Yeah, not to mention that it's really big in conventions in which people are able to distribute some new comic book ideas and people would be really interested in reading it. Speaking of which, we actually met in person a few years ago when you were at a convention in Florida and you were producing your
Yeah.
stuff over there too.
Yeah, and it's so crazy because coronavirus now, right? So we haven't been able to do conventions,
Right,
and
right, unless it's virtual.
yeah, exactly. So that's been kind of wild because that's like a big part of indie comics. I mean, I guess depending on what avenue you take, but in my point of view, you got to do conventions to get yourself out there and to make sales. So it's kind of been strange not to do the conventions for now, what it is a year, and who knows how much longer. So yeah, an interesting. It will be interesting post COVID, what that's going to all look like.
Yeah, for sure, absolutely. I mean, I wouldn't be surprised if, for those who don't want to go to a convention because of COVID, maybe they'll do a hybrid in which it'll be both virtual and live person. But yeah, I mean, I think that even with before COVID, people would be afraid to get something called the con flu, in which, like, for some reason, because they're surrounded by hundreds of thousands of people, they would get sick with some sort of flu because, everybody's crowding to each other, waiting in line for getting something to eat or waiting in line for some autograph or whatever. It's like you do get a tendency of being around people who um, you don't know if they're well or not. So, I mean, I think definitely for sure once this whole COVID-19 thing is over, that they'll definitely have to do some major adjustments, especially with, I think I remember seeing a picture of I don't remember which convention it was. It may have been like some convention in California where they were showing off, this is the turnout for these people, and it was like over 50,000 people, and they were just like crowding around in an escalator, and it was like, you barely have like 2 inches to move. So it's unbelievable.
For sure. I don't know if conventions are going to look like that,
I don't know
and
either.
yeah, but it all depends. We're all living in that world, and hopefully, we could get a chance to quote unquote see some normalcy, I guess, if that's ever a thing.
Sure. So anyway, continuing on with like father like daughter. So what was the process of eventually getting your comic from being a screenplay to it eventually being a comic and then starting the Kickstarter?
Oh yeah, long process. So I publish my own book now, but I actually worked for a publisher called Short Fuse, and they really helped me find an artist. And the first time stuff that you always have to learn. They really helped, and find a letter, blah blah. So that was like my venture back then, and then we decided, oh, we should do Kickstarter because this is like 2000 and I don't even know, 2015 or something. So, this was before Kickstarter was I guess, quote unquote, as big it is now. But publishing myself, that's been fun too. And working on other projects, finding my own artists and finding your own letter and colorist. So it really is finding your team and figuring out budget and all that. And with Kickstarter, it's like anything else, like any other social media, and I guess I'll count it as a social media. It's not really, but it works like social media, where you have to learn the platform. You have to know what's on it. You got to learn how to navigate it, what the analytics are like for the site. So just like being a writer and anything you go into, you got to learn, and you got to study it.
Yeah, exactly. And also, it's very similar to being an entrepreneur as well, because I'm taking my minor in entrepreneurship. And with what we learned in entrepreneurship is that you need to be able to present yourself out there because there are thousands of other people who are going to be just like you. You just need to be able to find a way to make yourself stand out compared to everybody else. And not to mention about marketing yourself? How are you going to be able to present your product over to a person and say, okay, I have this product. What do you think of it? What did you like about it? Didn't you like about it? With Kickstarter, I feel that you need to be able to keep up your fan base updated with whatever that you're doing, whether it be, okay, update, we have 30% of this colored and blah 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 and all that stuff. So it's very important to notify your fans about, like, oh, this is happening, and we're getting one step closer for the release of this comic. And unfortunately, there have been bad cases of Kickstarter in which, like, they would have, maybe like one or two updates, and then they would not update for months, and you assume that they're really busy, but then you're wondering, oh man, have I been scanned or whatever? So yeah, it's always good to have a connection with your fan base, especially when you're doing a huge crowdfunding campaign.
Oh yeah, communication is definitely key in my opinion, and transparency. And I think on the creator side, if you've never done a Kickstarter, at least from my point of view, I always try to get most of the comic done beforehand. Now, that's not everyone's case. Some people are looking for Kickstarter because they literally at that moment can't pay for the project. Now, I'm lucky enough that I've been in the position where I've been able to pay for the comic with my own money and be able to use the crowdsourcing to, the return for the money. So everyone's paid. Like, I don't have artists wait for a paycheck while I'm waiting for Kickstarter. Lucky enough, I'm in the position where I could pay them up front and they can get their money beforehand. So that's great. And I think that's the issue with maybe some Kickstarters and why it takes so long, is that those projects aren't done because they couldn't pay for it up front. But yeah, I think you need to be transparent with that if that's what's going on. And you have to have a plan. You got to know how much you can get done before the project. And again, if you can, I say get most of the book done, or if not all of the book done, so you get into your customers' hands as quickly as possible.
So yeah, I'm sure that a lot of people who are wanting to know about how to start their own comic book series, or what are the step process of finding your artist and finding your color person, and all that kind of stuff. So how did you find the people that was going to work for like Father and Like Daughter?
Well, like I said, that was for Short Fuse Media found those people. But along the way, actually, everyone's actually changed there since our last two issues. While I took over the book completely, the only person that stayed on the book was my artist. So how I found my new colorist and my new letterer, they're actually just really good friends. So that was a coincidence that one of my really, really good friends, Brent Fowler, is also a comic creator and comic publisher. And he's also a letterer, and he's been doing this for 10 plus years, and I trust his work. And when I was looking for someone new, I don't think you could be proficient in everything. And I'm sure if you've been working as a letterer for 10 years, great lettering next to good lettering. And I think I know what good lettering looks like. I know what bad lettering looks like, but I don't know what great lettering looks like. So I always trust my friend Brant's opinion. And then when the opportunity came to get a new letterer, I was like, oh, hey, Brant, you want to be my letterer? So that ended up happening. And I'll obviously go into a story of, like, if you're not me and weren't previous connected to the comic book community, how you could find those people. My colorist, lucky enough, is Brant's wife. So I was able to find my colorist that way. And again, the artist I already previously had. Now, I've done other projects, and I'm working on a current project now where we had to do exactly what you have to do to get make another comic, which is to find an artist, colorist, and letterer. Now, again, for lettering, I'd probably use Brant, but to find a letterer, there's Facebook groups. There's wonderful Facebook groups, and you could study what it is, what makes good lettering, what makes bad lettering. That way you could hire the person you want. And I mean, visually, you could probably see as a reader if they're good or not. Again, it might be hard to tell if they're great, but you could tell. This is the same thing goes for anything you're hiring, is that you really got to look on the Facebook groups for artists and colorists. Great places. Behance is a good website. I really like ArtStation. I think has a lot of great creators on there. And then DeviantArt is another way to go. I don't love how the site navigates. I don't think it's as good as it used to be, but that's another example. Twitter, you could follow artists and colorists along the way and be like, okay, I'm going to bookmark that person. And then when you have your project, you could contact them, see what their rates are. Same thing for an artist. I think Twitter and Instagram and all those places. And really for the current project I'm working on, I did a mix of all of it. I looked through Twitter. I looked through Instagram. I looked through ArtStation, and we found a lot of my variant cover artists I found on ArtStation. So I hate to say it, but it's a lot of research. It's a lot of your time just looking through people's portfolios and trying to find those portfolios. And yeah, it's a lot of hard work, but it's definitely wonderful when it's all said and done and you got a great creative team behind you.
Yeah, and I think that once again, going into the discussion about how crucial social media is that um, we can be able to find all of these artists and all of these websites as opposed to like you have to know a person who knows a person who knows a person and say, hey, can you be able to hook me up with someone who's an artist? And they'll be like, sure, let me give you in contact with my guy, and then that person will get in contact with that person. So yeah, it was used to be like really complicated, especially if you weren't in the comic book industry and you wanted to get your foot in the door. So I think that with places such as DeviantArt or Twitter or all the websites that you just mentioned, is that you can be able to find a lot of talented people and they can be able to help you out with whatever that you need, especially within the world of whether it be with graphic novels or comics or strips or whatever. So yeah, for I think this is great advice, especially for those who are listening and you want to start your own original projects that yeah, you definitely need to take a lot of time into doing a ton of research and, save up money for your resources. Like, depending on who the artist is, they would pay you for maybe like, a half shot or a full shot, black and white, color, put in the details, shadows, all that kind of stuff. And yeah, I mean, that's going to cost money and it's going to cost people's time. And it may be, if you look into the rate, it does look like a lot, but this is what they do for a living. They work freelance, and they are very interested in working on original projects that they can be able to, say that they are very proud of doing. And I'm sure that for your artists and all the people that you worked with for Like Father, Like Daughter are very proud of all the work that they've been able to put into it.
Yeah, for sure. I always say it like this too, because I've gotten creators where they're like, well, why do I have to pay all this money to these people? Blah, blah, blah. It's like, yeah, like you just said, because it's their job and, it's a business. So it's an investment. That's, that's their job. And so your job is to figure out, okay, is this investment worth it? Can I make a profit off of it just like any other business? It's kind of like opening up a restaurant, right? Like you're not making money right away when you don't have customers, but you still need to buy the food, you still need to buy the chairs, you still need to buy the space. So you're putting money into something that will hopefully make you money in the long run, but it's an investment just like anything. And you have to treat it like your own business because it is your own business.
Now, I'm actually curious. Who have been your favorite characters, and what's been your favorite moment of Like Father, Like Daughter so far?
Oh man, my favorite moment thus far is probably in issue 5. Spoiler alert. We find out Casey's mom was the villain the whole time. So she works for the KGB and she is like undercover the whole time. And we learn more about her story in issue 6. And then in this arc in general, we're going to learn a lot more about her and the complications of her being a villain. And that we also learned that the reason her dad left was because of her. But Casey doesn't know that. My favorite character? That's so hard. I have to go with Casey's friend though, Stephanie. She has a really cool arc coming up after issue 8 that I'm really proud of. And yeah, I think it's kind of cool to see a character grow into her own because she's like literally a supporting character, and that's always been her role, is being a supportive friend, and like no matter what, she cares about other people sometimes more than herself, and taking care of herself. So I'm excited for people to see the journey of learning more about her.
All right. Well, definitely for those who are interested in reading more into it, we'll discuss more about that later on. But now, of course, you were saying earlier about how, doing your own, comic book series is essentially like doing your own business. And, unfortunately, and this happens to a lot of businesses, sadly, that there's going to be a lot of setbacks and there's going to be maybe some things that you wanted to put into it, but you weren't able to. So, were there any parts of the story that you wanted to put into, or any crucial scenes that you wanted to have, but you weren't able to do either because of time constraints or because of budgetary issues, or maybe because of anything else?
Lucky enough, I think we've timed the book really well, where we were able to make the money we needed to meet our budget, and our last Kickstarter go above our budget, and make a profit just on Kickstarter, which was really cool. And hopefully we could do that again for this one, and make the book even better, because when you get higher than your budget, you could put your money into the next issue, and making things even better, and I think that's pretty cool. But yeah, luckily I haven't had any setbacks. I think the only setback I've ever had with budget is maybe I had a variant cover artist I really, really loved, but they were like $1,000, and I'm like, I can't afford $1,000 for a variant cover. But they deserve $1,000 because they're great, and I think all artists deserve even more for their time and effort. But yeah, I would say that was probably my biggest setback ever, is just maybe some great variant cover artists that I would have liked, but a little out of our budget.
I know that for a writer, especially since you have to go through like multiple drafts, or you have to have like you have an idea and maybe it doesn't work out the first time. Were there any cases in which like you had an idea or you had a character or anything of the sort, but you eventually cut it off, or you rewrote it in a way that fit more into the story?
Yeah, I mean, luckily I haven't had to kill any darlings. Like, I don't think I've ever really had to really kill a story in that regard. But I've always, I think, built on every draft makes something better. And in the moment, you might think it's a darling, because like, oh, I really like that line, or I really like that scene, but it's just not, this part's not working. And I think in the long run, it's always better when you try to figure something else out and maybe find another darling. There's definitely stories I wish I could tell earlier, like the one I was talking about with Stephanie. There's a big story for her that I wish I could do now, and I think people will really love when we get there. But it's pacing, right? You want to have the kitchen sink and everything in it. You want, as a writer, you got to have to pace things correctly. As much as I'm excited to tell that story, naturally it didn't happen right now. It naturally happens in issue 9. So yeah, there's things I'm super excited about that I wish was here, and like the Jessica reveal happened in issue 5. I wish it was there in issue 1. I wish I could have told that story right away, but it wouldn't have the impact it did if it weren't in issue 5, because we needed to learn more about Invulnerable and Casey's relationship before we got that reveal. So yeah, sometimes in the moment it feels like, oh man, I wish I could do that. But in the long run, you're doing it for a reason, and it's for the product to be better.
I definitely want to wrap things up with a few more questions. So, I want to know for, let's just say that, because we have a lot more, appreciation for indie comics, and even some of them, would go into be, animated series or live action series on streaming services or even in theaters. How would you like to see an adaptation of like Father Like Daughter?
I always felt like it worked for a TV show. Interestingly enough, because I said, and which is true, that this started out as a screenplay. I think as I've written the comic, it's kind of grown into a more serialized story, and I definitely see a TV season for it, and a continuous story. So I would say a TV show.
And would it be live action or animated?
Ooh, animated would be cool. I want to see how this Invincible show does, the Robert Kirkman one, because I think in that vein it'd be kind of interesting.
Oh, okay. And who would you like to work on it?
I definitely would want to be the showrunner for that one. So me.
Well, I
But
meant
no,
by
like
who
actors and
would you
stuff.
like to hire to animate if you could?
Animate, that's interesting. I'm interested to see what Chris Anka's doing on the Into the Spider-Verse, the movie, the
Sure.
sequel. Yeah, and I love his work, so I'm gonna say Chris Anka. That'd be kind of cool.
Yeah, that would be awesome. So, for those who are wanting to get started on their own comic series, is there any other advice that you would like to share that you wish that you would have learned the first time you were doing it?
Um, be patient, I think, is some advice I would have, and oh, man, I feel like because it's been such a long journey, I could do a whole podcast of advice. But I think a lot of people, I think when I see a lot of people come up to me and say, "Hey, I want to write comics," I say, "Cool, what have you written?" A lot of times says, "Well, I have this idea," and that's not writing. So I think my biggest thing is to say, when you want to write a comic, write a comic. Learn how to write a comic. Learn how to write a script. Write the script out. Write more comics before you publish that first issue. Write a second issue. Write a third. Know your ending. So I would say, just because that's usually the question I get the most, and that's a response I've gotten the most, is do the research. Yeah, just try to understand the medium and try to understand what goes into writing. It's definitely more than the idea, because I think anyone could come up with an idea, but a writer can write.
Yes, very true. So, yeah, Kat, thank you so much for coming on by. I really do appreciate it.
Of course, thank you for having me.
So, I would like to know not only where people can find Like Father, Like Daughter, but also where can people find you at on social media?
Yeah, you can find me at Comic Uno on Twitter for mostly anywhere you can find me at Comic Uno. That's also my YouTube channel where I review comics on a weekly basis. And for Like Father, Like Daughter, with the Kickstarter, if you're watching it in November slash the beginning of December, definitely, I hope you guys could go support Like Father, Like Daughter. That is the best place to support the comic, is when those Kickstarters are live. You could literally support the book for $1 and you're getting 8 free digital comics. So I really try to get good prices and to give you guys a lot of good stuff with the Kickstarter. But if you're watching this later or whatever, I also have an Etsy store under Comic Uno where I have right now, they call her Dancer, which is my other book, available, issues 1 through 2, and Like Father, Like Daughter is issue 1 through 5. I'm not putting that live for issue 6 just yet, because I want to include it to the Kickstarter with issue 7. And then, I mean, yeah, I'll have issue 6 on Etsy after the Kickstarter.
All right, then. So, thank you so much for listening, everyone. Let us know in the comments below if you have read Like Father, Like Daughter. What did you think of it? Who were your favorite characters? What were your favorite moments? And also, if any of you guys are interested in, producing your own comics, or, maybe even producing your own original works, then definitely, share your work, or, for those who are interested in it. But yeah, thank you so much for listening, everyone. Hope to see you around soon, and take care.